Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Teens Talk Politics podcast. And again, we have the same panel as we did for the second episode, but Mithun somehow transmogrified into a kind of almost bald kurta wearing 10th kid. Okay?
Ouch.
Okay, fine. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about India's path to becoming a global superpower because we're Indians. We need that pride. We need our egos boosted, and also because it is an important geopolitical and economic issue. So, can India become a superpower? Like, is that even possible, in your opinion?
India is already a regional power. Why not superpower?
Okay, what's the difference between the two?
A regional. So right now, where India stands, it exerts significant power in all its aspects over the region it is in. That is the southwest. That's Southeast Asia, right?
Uh-huh.
The difference between a regional power and a superpower is simply that a superpower extends its power all across the world. Like the United States, for example, an apt example is culture, right? So a superpower is able to exert its culture all across the world, whereas a regional power has a very local, limited cultural exertion.
But is culture really something you should be taking into consideration for a power? Isn't that more like guns, shooting, and or being oil hungry? Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Well, there are two aspects to it. Now, for considering yourself to be a superpower, I mean, there's of course no codified definition for super.
Mhm.
So you can either look at it as hard power or soft power, as Tanmay mentioned.
Mhm.
Soft power being things like cinema, clothing, like just before the podcast we were talking about it, or it could be things like in terms of hard power, economy or military, these kind of things. So when you're talking about a superpower, what first comes into your mind is the hard power part, of course. Now, where are we in terms of military? Is one question. Where are we in terms of economy? Is one question. Are we competing with countries like China? Is it a question? So, and foreign policy, of course, which, foreign policy is a reflection of what is happening inside and what is your communication to the outside world too, and your form of outreach. So these kind of things need to be taken into consideration.
So, what's your opinion on India not being a signatory of the NPT, which is basically the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, where it's like only 5 people can have nukes, everybody else cannot have. And India is not a signatory to it, obviously, because we still have nuclear power and more specifically nuclear weapons. So, do you think that plays an important role in being a global superpower nowadays? Just having the capacity to just bomb anybody?
I'm going to
Or-
say the same thing I say to liberals, right? Liberalism works as long as everybody is a liberal.
Mhm.
Same way, nuclear non-proliferation works as long as everybody gives up nukes. As
Yeah.
long as there is even a single nuclear weapon in the world, there is no point of India giving up their nuclear weapons, right? Because that's just de-arming ourselves when there is potential for an attack against us. And
Yeah.
we as Indians have always maintained the consistent foreign policy since 5,000 years that we will not attack 1st,
Mhm.
but if we are attacked, we will retaliate in a fitting way.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
disarming ourselves makes no sense till with that regard.
Oh, okay.
Secondly, on the aspects, right? Uh, what defines the military power, like the nuclear weapons, etc. Now, as soon as all the countries, like major countries like the USA, China itself, they superly undermine, they underreport
Mhm.
their statistics on how much they fund their military, their economy, their everything. They are putting it in a lower rate. For example, USA has over a trillion investments only for military, but like
Mhm.
that is that's disclosed information, but we know for a fact that's not the disclosed that's not the actual fact, because it's going to be way more than what has been recorded. Similarly, China, right?
Yeah.
China has been known for keeping their information disclosed, so what
Uh-huh.
they tell out to the world is not exactly what
Got
their
it.
thing. So if we give up our nuclear weapons, we are being vulnerable to the entire world, especially with tensions from China itself.
All right.
I
Got
think
it.
this is a beautiful example of soft power, right? The fact that we as Indians are discussing disarming ourselves just because America told us to
That's true.
is in
Yeah.
itself a reflection of America's soft
Right.
power, right?
Yeah. On top of that, like just coming to America's soft power. So the dollar, right? That's something that's been bugging the entire economy for a good while. And it originated in the 1970s with the Bretton Woods Conference, where the dollar was made the official reserve currency of the world. Where they're like, okay, listen, I know you don't have gold. You put your money against my money, and we're all happy. But that did give US supersized power over the global economy as a whole. And even then, we're still moving away from that, right? We have BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And India is one of the major proponents of the fact that they're trying to get the currency to go global. And I think that holds a lot of leverage and it also gives us a lot of potential for global expansion. So, what's your opinion on
I'm
that?
going to weigh in on this, right? I think Indian foreign policy under Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar
Mhm.
is very smart with this regard. So, essentially, what India is doing right now under the scenes is that we're working with new countries in the global south that we have never worked with before.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you define the global south just for the benefit of the audience?
The global south is countries that are still in the development process, like a lot of African countries, a lot of Southeast Asian countries. So, for example, right now, India recently concluded a trade deal
Mhm.
with Guinea, right?
Yeah.
Which is a country we have not had significant business relations with before.
Mhm.
Now, the idea of doing this is the difference is almost 30 years ago, if we had done this,
Mhm.
we would have done our transactions in US dollar.
Mhm.
But today, the transactions were done in INR.
Okay.
Same way, when we're buying oil from Russia, we're buying oil in INR.
Mhm.
And every new transaction that we make with a new country in INR is one step forward towards pushing INR as a global currency and one step back for the US dollar.
That's true.
And I
Okay.
think that's something that's very importantly being placed and very strategically being placed in Indian foreign policy.
Mhm.
Ishwar,
Got it.
thoughts?
Oh well, I'm not in economics, dude, so I'll refrain from talking about it.
No, but with
yeah,
regards to general Indian foreign policy on like the Russia-Ukraine war or its ties with China or lack of ties or however you want to look at it, what do you think is your opinion about all of that? Especially in the geographical subsection that is like the Indian subcontinent, right? You have India, China, Nepal, Pakistan. Just immediate relations with all of those people. How do you think India is handling all of that?
Oh well, look, in terms of whatever it may be, Ukraine or the Palestinian stand that we took, that was, I mean, it was perfect. Sense that look, these are distant countries geographically speaking. Of course, we might have military ties with one country or some grains being produced somewhere, which might have affected us.
Mhm.
But in terms of geography and our immediate security, it's not
Uh-huh.
something that is threatened.
Yeah.
So in that sphere where our security is not threatened, our direct security is not threatened, but other indirect things like our supply of grains or military, someone
Supply of what?
grains,
Greens. Okay.
grains.
Food grains.
Man,
Oh, grains.
Not
I heard
again.
Koreans, then greens, then okay. I'm so sorry.
Iyer.
Okay, Iyer, yeah, you know. Sorry, my bad.
Weighing in on this.
No, wait.
little bit.
Are you done? You had more to say.
No,
right?
so
Yeah.
that is a foreign policy that's shaped depending on your geography.
Uh-huh.
So when it's not directly affecting your security, that's one stand. But when it's your immediate neighborhood,
Mhm.
you've got to be strong, whether it's China or whether it's Pakistan. So according to that, you have to assess it. You can't apply the same logic here and there. You have
Okay.
to assess it on the basis of geography first.
See,
Got it.
adding to that, like India is a heavy exporting country,
Mhm.
right? Now, with regards to that, it's going to be possible for India to become a superpower
Uh-huh.
only by the sense that the foreign exchange reserves that
Mhm.
we have in our country are are increasing rapidly. For
Uh-huh.
example, right now India is considered to be the fastest growing GDP
Uh-huh.
compared to US and China ever have been.
Mhm.
Right, our GDP is increasing at a massive pace.
Mhm.
Right, but still we are ranked fifth on the GDP if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Essentially, what determines the superpower of a country? The GDP, the military strength,
Uh-huh.
geopolitical situation, as Isha mentioned
Yeah.
before. Now, going on about those lines, having exports and having a huge, massive population in our country itself,
Mhm.
there are people who leave the country.
Yeah.
Right, that is one of our major drawbacks because
Yeah. Brain drain, right?
brain drain exactly. So most of the CEOs in the top tier companies are Indians itself. They are
Yeah.
the citizen. They were the citizens of
Yeah,
India.
Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai,
Exactly.
Adobe CEO also,
So
although I can't recall that
the
name.
India could be taken as a clear case study of brain drain here.
Mhm.
Now, what the simple ideology for that economic downgrowth
Mhm.
within our country could be because the ideology among the society that, what will I do in India,
Mhm.
right? I'm gonna be a school professor at max. If I study so much, I can go to a research institution. I can
Mhm.
do a 9 to 5 job,
Yeah.
etc. That's the ideology behind the society of. But when they go abroad, they're ready to do any work. They have the
Mhm.
flexibility. So
Mhm.
that ideology is gonna give them the motive, like the essence to go outside. Right.
Okay, got it.
Similarly, if there are families in our country, their
Mhm.
families, the FIFA and the FITA transactions into our country,
What is that? From
foreign
foreign?
investment from abroad,
Okay, okay.
right? So such elements also can be added to the national income, but
Mhm.
cannot influence the GDP.
Got it. So, how do you think the potential of India becoming a global superpower has implications for like the common people, right? Like, should we care? Because even though the GDP is increasing at such a rapid pace, GDP per capita in India is still one of like it's one of the lowest globally, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, do you really think having that power or having that leverage globally and geopolitically would make life any different for the common man?
Def- Definitely, and I'm going to weigh in on this quite a bit because I honestly disagree with the way GDP per capita is considered in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way it's calculated in India is far from the reality, the ground reality.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that the benefits of Indian economic growth haven't touched you
Mm-hmm.
or or this dividend of the population, then you're heavily mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Because just 30 years back, our GDP per capita was in three digits,
Yeah.
right? In US dollars. The reason our GDP per capita is so low is just because we have such a vast population. When you're dividing anything by 1.4 billion, it's bound to become a smaller number.
Yeah, that's true.
The fact of the matter is the GDP per capita does not account for chances of growth, right?
Mhm.
What I mean by that is, in our demographic dividend, the fact is we have one of the youngest, most eager to work populations
Mhm.
across the globe, and the GDP per capita number that you're giving me does not account for the potential of change that could occur by that young, hardworking population that wants to see a better future.
Got it.
One last example I would like to
Mhm.
provide here, right? Today's youth in other Western countries are demotivated to work.
Mhm.
Why? Because the GDP per capita has reached a saturation point there.
Yeah,
There is no room to grow,
got it.
right? So me as a youth, me as an American youth, I have no ambition. I am demotivated. But me as an Indian youth who has
Mhm.
seen what I could become in India,
Uh-huh.
right? That is the true ambition that GDP per capita does not count.
Got it.
If I may
Got it.
weigh in. So, two things. So, one, Albi spoke about how there's brain drain,
Uh-huh.
and your question was about doesn't matter to the average Indian.
Uh-huh.
So, I'll try to loop these two in to an
Uh-huh.
extent. Now, brain drain necessarily doesn't have an immediate effect on your economy.
Uh-huh.
Immediate. The reason being, I'll give you an example. When there was the 1991 economic reforms, right?
Uh-huh.
It was for the reforms took place because we were in an economic crisis.
Mhm.
Multiple reasons. There was a Gulf War going on, but a significant thing you'll have to understand is that the reason the Gulf War was affecting us is not solely because of the oil trade, but the money that was being sent by the Indian workers over there
Mhm.
that cut down because of the Gulf crisis.
Got it.
So it doesn't necessarily have an immediate effect on your economy,
Mhm.
but when you're at least aspiring or when you think you're going to be a superpower in the next how many ever years,
Mhm.
it is important to keep that populace in so that it doesn't have an after effect on your economy, if
Got
not
it.
an immediate effect.
Got
Just
it.
because you don't see an immediate effect doesn't mean it won't be there.
Got it. And geopolitically, do you think we need to be cultivating ties with certain countries or like pruning ties with others, or do you think our foreign minister and foreign policy is satisfactory?
I
Like
think
Albi, what's your opinion on that?
That is where we talk about the underdevelopment of our military strength, right?
Mhm.
We are still in the fourth gen aircraft systems,
Mhm.
where the rest of the country is fifth gen. Now,
Mhm.
our fifth gen aircraft, that is the ACMA, right?
Mhm.
That is going to be released only, the prototype for that is only going to be released in 2030,
Mhm.
whereas the other countries already have put a foot in their sixth gen.
Mhm.
So we are really behind. So
Mhm.
connecting, like having connections geopolitically,
Mhm.
can improve the technological advancements overall, and
Got it.
that could influence military itself.
Yeah.
Right. So that is my take on this.
Great.
But I think I disagree with Albi a little bit here. I feel
Mhm.
like that's only saying one part of the story, right? I honestly am a huge fan of Minister S. Jaishankar and the foreign policy under him, simply because India has switched from taking a moral stance
Mhm.
that's neutrality to an India first stance,
Mhm.
and that is something I agree with a lot, right?
Mhm.
Because again, similar to what I said about liberalism earlier, morality only works if everybody is moral.
That's true.
As long as
Yeah.
you have one capitalist player, as long as you have somebody who's looking for their incentive, being India first is much better than being moral or being
Mhm.
neutral in things. Right?
I
Got
mean, my stand would be always, even in the previous debate, I know I'm sitting in this corner, but
Uh-huh.
I'm supposed to be sitting somewhere
Uh-huh.
between them. The thing is this, you got to find the middle ground between your morality and whatever you think your ethics are,
Mhm.
and also your necessity, which is what you need as a country, which is India first.
Got it.
Now, I can't be a foreign policy expert, so to speak, and assess what my minister did. I mean, of course, I truly love, as Tanmay said, I do support him.
Mhm.
But for me to assess, well, was one statement on this issue correct? Was one statement on this issue correct? I mean, I would look at the larger picture
Mhm.
in terms of countries like Russia. So your question was, what type of relation should we maintain with certain countries, right? So of course, you'll have to find that middle ground to first start with.
Mhm.
After that, you will have to assess the dispute itself. Like,
Got it.
I'll have to see if Israel Palestine affects me,
Mhm.
and the high ground I take might not be the same high ground for anyone else.
Got it.
So even when you speak of morality, it is subjective again.
Got it. Great. So I think we can start wrapping up now
Hmm.
because I'm really happy with how much we've covered, right? So we went over economic stances, geopolitical stances, military stances, and all of these things are tied together, right? Because our geopolitical relations could have with our military, like Albi said, something about Acme. I think that's Acma. No, that was a
I
phase
think
thing.
one last
Yeah.
thing we should
Teenagers
quickly
stuff.
cover, if we have a couple of minutes, is soft power, because
Uh-huh.
we've covered more aspects of hard power, right?
Uh-huh.
And this is where it's going to get controversial. So I'll really quickly put the question out, and then we can weigh in on
Mhm.
it. What is Indian soft power in terms of culture, right? Because exerting soft power is exerting your culture.
Mhm.
In a state like India, in a secular state
Mhm.
like India, is Indian culture and thereby the soft power India should be exuding of a religious character, of a social character? If yes, what is it? Let's start with Ishwar. Let's all weigh
Yeah.
on it.
Oh well, butter chicken and Punjabi dudes is not the soft power I'll
Yeah.
be looking for.
Uh-huh.
Just Raj.
Yeah.
So the thing is this: when you talk about soft power, at the end of the day, the question is what ramifications it has.
Yeah.
If I talk about Indian soft power in the immediate neighborhood, like
Mhm.
let's say a place like Thailand or UAE,
Mhm.
it's important because what the population thinks to to a particular extent
Mhm.
is what is the relations you have with that country, especially with Arab countries, because of the amount of Indian population there. The soft power India exerts over there is truly if is going to result in some economic development
Got
that will affect you.
Yeah.
But if it's again, as I said, butter chicken in USA, not gonna work,
Got
not
it.
gonna help.
Yeah.
Okay. So, my my intake on soft power is going to be like, if that was a concern that we primarily had,
Uh-huh.
right? We should abandon suits because
Uh-huh.
it is the Western propaganda.
Yeah.
Like, I am going to wear. Tanmay is going to kill me after this.
Uh-huh.
But right. So, before this podcast even started, Tanmay,
Uh-huh.
all of us had a conversation about how we should be walking, shirtless.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Boys these days.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Quickly,
quickly.
This
Keep
is
it.
something I've been eager to speak about. I think as the only person wearing Indian clothes on this panel today,
Mhm.
I have a little bit to say on
I
soft
was
power.
wearing in the last podcast. Right?
Yeah.
Cut me some slack.
Um, That's I think the fact that I said Indian clothes to a kurta and nobody flinched is
Mhm.
what soft power is what I was talking about, right? What aspects of Indian culture should we be exuding out of soft power? Now, a little controversially here, I do believe that the one unique thing India has to offer in terms of soft power is its 5,000-year-old dharmic culture, right?
Mhm.
Now, this is a little controversial because the people who do believe in the secular nature of India will say that, hey, no, India has a lot of other religions, and if you're exuding soft power, you should be exuding a mixed taste of soft power.
Mhm.
My simple response would be you already have countries who are exuding Christian soft power and or Islamic soft power, right? India is the unique country where we have dharmic culture
Mhm.
inside
Got it.
our nation, and that is one soft power that the world needs right now.
Got it.
From
Got it.
yoga to mindfulness to kurtas and meditation, I think
Mhm.
Indian soft power has the potential to, encapsulate the entire world because of
Mhm.
its beauty.
Yeah.
And that
Got
is
it.
something that should actually be policy of the government of India to exude out.
Got
Sure,
it.
key to follow up.
Okay.
But
Yes, we
one
have to
thing,
wrap up though.
one
Okay, fine. Sure.
Okay, so are you? I mean, for most Indians who are
One
opponents
sentence.
of, yeah, as Tanmay said, spreading out Indian culture and whatnot, it's very important to differentiate culture from religion, although they are
Mhm.
very syncretically related to each other. What you show out as soft power
Uh-huh.
might not necessarily be something that's religious in nature.
Got it. Got it.
So that's one aspect people need to
Great.
keep in mind.
So I would like to wrap up by saying Nato Nato was played at the Oscars, and I
The
think that's
Kalki
a good.
supremacy, bro.
Yeah, because I think that's a step forward. So again, like always, super educative, informative. I learned a lot. So in conclusion, I think we can say that India's path to becoming a global superpower is multifaceted. First, you have hard power, soft power, and in hard power you have economic, military, geopolitical, and in soft power you have the question of what kind of soft power do we want our government to be putting out there. And as again, we're left with a lot of unanswered questions, but I think we all learned a lot. I did for sure. And with that, that's the end of episode 4 of the Teens Talk Politics podcast. And we will catch you all next time.